When most people hear the word addiction, their minds instantly picture needles, bottles, or substances locked behind warning labels. But Carl Jung, and anyone who dares to look deeper, would remind us that addiction wears many masks, and most of them are invisible to the untrained eye. Addiction doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in the quiet habits we normalize. It's the 9th scroll on Instagram in under a minute. It's that second episode that turns into an entire season. It's waiting anxiously for a text from someone just to feel okay again. And because it doesn't look dangerous at first, we tell ourselves it's harmless, until one day we realize we're no longer choosing it, it's choosing us. The truth is this: addiction is not just about chasing highs. More often, it's about escaping lows. It's about numbing the heaviness that creeps in when life feels flat, uninspired, or meaningless. Jung understood that these compulsive patterns weren't random, they were signals. When the psyche can't find nourishment at the soul level, it starts searching for substitutes. Netflix, food, social media, relationships, anything that offers a spark of dopamine, even if just for a moment. And that's the terrifying part, because at first it feels like relief. The scroll, the binge, the drink, they soothe the emptiness for a while. But soon the soothing becomes shackles. What once gave comfort now becomes compulsion. The activity itself is not evil. The problem is that we've turned it into medicine for a wound we've never named. Addiction, Jung would say, is not the illness. It is the symptom. It's the psyche's cry for wholeness disguised as craving. Think about it. Why does one person sip wine and stop while another spirals into dependence? Why does one person enjoy social media casually while another loses hours in endless loops of scrolling? It's not about the substance or the behavior. It's about what the soul is lacking underneath. Jung believed addiction reveals not a weakness in willpower, but a fracture in connection, to meaning, to authenticity, to the self. So, when you hear the word addiction, expand the definition. It's not just about substances that destroy lives. It's also about the subtle patterns that quietly erode our connection to ourselves. The real danger is not just in the bottle, but in the emptiness that made you reach for it in the first place. And once you see that, you stop asking, "How do I quit this?" and start asking, "What is this trying to tell me?" Carl Jung, one of the most influential voices in psychology and spirituality, challenged the way we look at addiction. For most of modern culture, addiction is framed as the problem, something to eliminate, to battle, to quit through sheer willpower. But Jung flipped the lens. He argued that addiction isn't the disease, it's the symptom. It's not the fire, it's the smoke. And unless we learn to trace that smoke back to the fire burning underneath, we'll never truly heal. Why did Jung say this? Because he recognized that the human being is not just a brain chemistry machine. We are souls longing for meaning, wholeness, and connection. When those needs are denied or suppressed, the psyche cries out, and addiction becomes its language. In Jung's view, the bottle, the drug, the phone, the endless distractions, these aren't the root issue. They're just substitutes, desperate attempts to fill an emptiness inside. He once wrote, "Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism." Notice that last word, idealism. Jung was pointing to something radical. Addiction isn't about the object, but the inner hunger it tries to soothe. It could be substances, but it could just as easily be obsession with success, perfection, even spiritual highs. The common denominator is the same, a thirst for something the outer world cannot quench. This is where so many treatments fall short. They focus on the behavior, stop drinking, stop scrolling, stop eating sugar, without addressing the psychic split that gave birth to the behavior in the first place. Imagine patching a leaking pipe but never repairing the broken foundation beneath the house. That's what happens when we treat addiction on the surface level. We may win the short-term battle, but the war beneath still rages. Jung saw addiction as the psyche's way of crying out, "You've disconnected from yourself." Not your ego, not your resume, yourself. the deepest, most integrated part of who you are, the part rooted in creativity, authenticity, and meaning. Addiction emerges when we've silenced that self for too long, when we've chosen masks over truth, when we've traded authenticity for acceptance, and the soul, starved of nourishment, starts scavenging for substitutes in whatever it can find. So what does this mean for you? It means the craving isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. The compulsion isn't a moral failure, it's a messenger. Instead of asking only, how do I stop this behavior, Jung would invite you to ask, what is the deeper thirst this behavior is trying to quench? What part of me have I abandoned, and how can I welcome it back? The healing of addiction, then, is not about silencing the symptom, it's about listening to it. Not about punishment, but about integration. Because when you treat addiction as the enemy, you miss its gift. But when you honor it as a signal, you open the door to a wholeness that no substance, no screen, no external fix could ever give you. If addiction is the symptom, then what lies beneath it? Carl Jung believed the root of addiction begins in a fracture within the psyche, a disconnection from the self. And this fracture doesn't usually start with a bottle or a binge. It often begins much earlier, in the hidden corners of childhood.
For many, the split starts in environments where authenticity had a price. Maybe you had to be the good kid, always obedient, never causing trouble. Maybe you had to be the strong one, hiding your tears so others could lean on you. Or maybe you became the fixer, the caretaker, the one who held the family together at the cost of your own needs. In all of these roles, a message was planted deep in your unconscious. Parts of you are not welcome here. Jung called this psychic splitting. It's the process of burying the pieces of ourselves that were rejected, shamed, or ignored, and constructing a mask, a persona, that society, family, or culture would accept. On the surface, you play your role. Inside, your true needs, desires, and emotions go underground. But here's the problem. The self doesn't disappear. The energy of those denied parts doesn't die. It lingers. And the more we suppress it, the louder the unconscious begins to call out for relief. The psyche cannot live indefinitely cut off from its own wholeness, so it searches for substitutes. A drink to take the edge off, a partner to make you feel enough, a screen to drown out the silence. These aren't random choices. They are desperate attempts to reconnect with the vitality that was buried. This is why addiction so often feels like hunger. It's not just craving for stimulation, it's longing for integration. Your brain and body reach for dopamine, but your soul is reaching for the missing pieces of yourself. Addiction becomes the bridge, however fragile, between emptiness and temporary relief. But as you know, the bridge never holds. The emptiness always returns, often deeper than before. Jung understood this cycle intimately. He warned that when we deny the authentic self long enough, the unconscious compensates. What doesn't find expression in healthy ways finds expression through symptoms, compulsions, neuroses, addictions. They are all signals of the same truth. Something within you is calling to be reclaimed. So instead of asking, why can't I control this behavior? Jung would have us ask, where did I lose connection to myself? What part of me did I abandon to survive? Because until that fracture is acknowledged and healed, the loop continues. Dopamine crash, compulsive escape, shame, emptiness, round and round. The real beginning of healing then is not fighting the substance or the screen, but turning inward. It is daring to look at the forgotten child, the silenced artist, the repressed anger, the unspoken grief, all the fragments of the self waiting in the shadows. That is where the thirst comes from. And until we drink from that well, no external fix will ever satisfy us. Once the disconnection from the self has taken root, addiction doesn't appear as a single destructive act. It emerges as a cycle, a loop that quietly traps us and tightens over time. Jung understood this loop not as a sign of weakness, but as the psyche's attempt, albeit a painful one, to restore balance. And until we can see the pattern clearly, we stay caught in its spiral. Here's how it often begins. First comes the inner emptiness, the subtle but persistent feeling that something is missing, that life is flat, uninspired, or meaningless. This emptiness isn't laziness. It's the hunger of the parts of you that have been pushed into shadow, waiting for acknowledgement. Next comes the dopamine crash. With your authentic self suppressed, daily life doesn't feel nourishing. The little sparks of joy that keep people motivated, creativity, connection, purpose, feel out of reach. Your brain longs for relief, so it finds the quickest shortcut it knows: a drink, a scroll, a binge, a fix. That shortcut leads to temporary escape. For a moment, the emptiness softens. The world feels a little lighter. The ache quiets down. And because it works, even briefly, the psyche remembers it. This is how we survive. But the relief never lasts. Soon after, the next stage enters: shame. You feel guilty for what you've done, weak for not resisting, broken for not being stronger. That shame doesn't just sit in your mind. It deepens the very wound of disconnection you were trying to escape. You judge yourself, and that judgment pushes the abandoned parts of you even further underground. And so the loop restarts. Emptiness, dopamine crash, escape, shame, more emptiness. Each turn of the cycle reinforces the next. And the tragic irony is this: the very thing you use to cope with the void ends up widening it. Jung believed this loop thrives in secrecy and judgment. The more we hide our compulsions, the more the shadow grows. The more we condemn ourselves, the stronger the shame becomes. And yet, he insisted, the loop is not evidence that you're broken. It's evidence that your soul is trying to get your attention. Every relapse, every craving, every late-night binge is not just weakness. It's a smoke signal from the unconscious saying, you've left a part of yourself behind. Come find me. This is why Jung insisted that healing addiction isn't about willpower. Willpower fights the symptom but ignores the source. True healing begins when you can witness the loop with compassion, when you can pause in the middle of shame and ask not, what's wrong with me, but what is this cycle trying to teach me? Because the moment you stop condemning the loop and start listening to it, you begin to loosen its grip. The shame loses its fuel, and what once looked like a prison can become a map, a guide back to the parts of you that addiction was trying, in its own distorted way, to reconnect. Carl Jung never believed that addiction could be healed simply by force or by cutting off the behavior. For him, lasting recovery came only through integration, bringing light to the shadow, listening to what the craving is trying to say, and reconnecting with the parts of the self that were abandoned. To do this, he left us not just theory, but a toolkit for transformation. Let's explore 3 powerful tools that don't fight addiction, but help you decode it. Tool number 1, shadow work. Jung's most revolutionary insight was the concept of the shadow, the hidden chamber of the psyche where we store everything we've denied, repressed, or judged about ourselves. The anger you weren't allowed to show, the sadness you were told was weakness, the longing for love you were shamed for. These parts don't disappear, they go underground, and they leak out in disguised forms like addictions, projections, and compulsions. Shadow work is the practice of turning toward these parts with compassion instead of fear. One simple way to begin is journaling. Ask yourself, if my addiction had a voice, what would it say to me? Let it speak. Write without censoring. You might be surprised at the truth that comes through. The unmet need, the buried wound, the forgotten self that only wants to be seen. Tool number 2, breath work. Though Jung didn't teach breath work directly, he would have recognized its power. The breath is the only bridge between the conscious and unconscious that we can control. Most of us breathe shallowly, especially when stressed, which traps old emotions in the body. Conscious rhythmic breathing creates a portal. It bypasses the thinking mind and tells the nervous system, it's safe now, you can release. In a session, people often cry, laugh, shake, or feel long-suppressed memories surface. This isn't chaos, it's integration. Addiction numbs, breathwork reveals. Even a single session can make you realize the thing you were chasing in substances was never pleasure. It was the feeling of being fully alive in your own body. Tool number 3, symbolic ritual. Jung often reminded us the soul speaks in images. That's why dreams, myths, and rituals are so powerful. They bypass logic and speak directly to the unconscious. A simple ritual can shift what words alone cannot. Try this. Sit in a quiet space, light a candle, and place a mirror before you. Look into your own eyes, not to criticize, but to witness. Speak aloud. I know I've been trying to escape something. I may not understand it yet, but I am ready to listen. Then write a letter to the part of you that is addicted. Don't shame it, understand it. Place the letter under the candle and let it burn for 15 minutes while you breathe slowly. The act itself is symbolic. You are reconnecting with your deeper self, telling your unconscious you are no longer alone. Each of these tools is simple, but they open doors that addiction has kept locked. Shadow work gives voice to the silenced. Breath work frees the body from stored pain. Ritual reawakens the dialogue with the soul. Together they remind you the path forward is not about fighting yourself. It's about welcoming yourself back home. Most people think of healing as going back to who they were before the addiction, back to the days when life felt simpler, lighter, easier. But Carl Jung would warn us, that version of you, the one before the addiction, was already fragmented. That self was already split, already disconnected, already carrying wounds beneath the surface. If that weren't true, addiction would never have found its foothold. Jung's vision of healing wasn't about rewinding. It was about individuation, the process of becoming whole. Not perfect, not flawless, but integrated. Individuation is when all the parts of you that were once rejected, silenced, or hidden in shadow finally return to the circle of your being. The child who wanted to play but was told to grow up. The rebel who questioned rules but was punished for speaking. The artist who longed to create but was shamed into silence. The vulnerable one who needed love but learned to numb instead. Each of them belongs. Each of them is part of your wholeness. Addiction thrives in fragmentation. Healing thrives in integration. Individuation is what happens when you stop fighting against your pain and instead invite it in as a teacher. It is the recognition that your cravings are not signs of weakness, but signposts to lost parts of yourself. Every relapse, every compulsion, every restless night is not proof of failure. It's a messenger pointing you toward what still needs to be welcomed home. And here's the paradox. Individuation doesn't mean you'll never feel temptation again. It doesn't mean the old patterns vanish overnight. What it means is that you no longer confuse those patterns for your identity. You see them for what they are, echoes of the past, shadows longing to be integrated, not dictators of your future. In Jung's words, we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Individuation is that very act, bringing darkness into awareness, not to destroy it, but to transform it. So what does this look like in everyday life? It means creating a life that feeds your soul, not just your schedule. It means choosing environments that reflect your truth, not just your obligations. It means letting meaning replace stimulation, filling your days not with endless distractions, but with experiences that actually nourish your spirit. Individuation is not abstract. It is deeply practical. It's in the boundaries you set, the art you create, the connections you honor, the honesty you allow yourself to live.
This is the real miracle. The addiction that once felt like it was breaking you becomes the very doorway to your becoming. It forces you to confront the places you abandoned yourself and invites you to reclaim them. Individuation is the alchemy of turning suffering into selfhood, of weaving all your fragments into one coherent, radiant life. And that's what wholeness really is. Not the absence of scars, but the presence of every part of you finally belonging. Addiction has a way of convincing us that we're broken, that our lives are ruined,
that we'll always be stuck in cycles of craving and shame. But Carl Jung would say something very different. Addiction is not a life sentence, it's a message. It's not the end of your story, it's the beginning of your return. When you shift your perspective, everything changes. The craving that once felt like an enemy becomes a guide. The relapse that once filled you with shame becomes information, a clue pointing to what still needs healing. The emptiness you've been trying to escape is not a void to fear, but a doorway back to your deeper self. This is what Jung meant when he said healing is not about imagining light, but about making the darkness conscious. Addiction is not the darkness itself. It is the smoke rising from the fire inside, asking you to tend to what burns. And here's the truth. You are not behind. You are not defective. Every moment you've spent struggling has been shaping you, preparing you, refining you. The parts of you that addiction tried to silence, the sensitive one, the seeker, the dreamer, are the very parts of you that will lead you into wholeness. Addiction doesn't disqualify you from your purpose, it initiates you into it. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires us to confront the shadow, reclaim what we've lost, and integrate it into our lives. And this isn't a one-time event, it's a spiral. You may revisit the same lessons again and again, but each time at a deeper level, with more awareness, more compassion, more tools. That's not failure, it's evolution. So if you're listening to this and you felt like giving up, let me say this directly, don't. Not because you owe it to anyone else, but because your presence here matters. There are people you haven't met yet whose lives will be touched by your story. There is art, healing, love, and wisdom that only you can bring into the world. But to offer it, you must stay. You must keep going. Every time you choose to feel instead of numb, every time you choose truth over denial, every time you choose compassion over shame, you reclaim a piece of your soul. And those pieces, gathered together, become the whole, radiant self you've been searching for all along. If these words resonate with you, let this be your sign. Comment below, I'm coming home. Share your journey, because your voice may be the lifeline someone else needs. And if you want to keep exploring psychology, spirituality, and the path of becoming whole, hit subscribe and join this community. Together, we're not just talking about healing, we're living it. You are not broken, you are becoming. And the world has been waiting for exactly who you're here to be.